Are we there yet? Order, order. Chris Evans to move the motion.
It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, Ms Furness. I move that this House considers the educational outcomes of young carers and young adult carers. I am pleased to see so many honourable members from across the House here today and thank them for attending. I know some of you have some very personal stories to tell and I look forward to hearing them. As many of you will be aware, yesterday was Young Carers Action Day and we've held a number of events in Parliament with the support of Carers Trust. This week we had Young Carers visiting number 10, writing directly to the Prime Minister, asking for his support and to ensure that young carers and young adult carers are a golden thread that go through everything his government does. Myself personally, I had students from Mark Hall Academy in Harlow visiting Parliament, and along with my the honourable lady from Mid Sussex, we did an open-top bus trip around London, which was going very well until, unfortunately, we were attacked by hail. A recent report by the Carers Trust identified a number of issues that young carers face in an educational setting. They identified that caring has a significant negative impact on education, and they identified awareness, identification and recording of young carers and young adult carers in educational settings is still too low, and that support for young carers in educational settings is also worryingly inconsistent. A few statistics to begin with. Almost half, 48% of young carers reported being bullied in the past year. More than 2 in 5, 44% of young carers frequently struggle to study for tests or exams because of the demands of their caring situation. Almost a third of young carers are regularly late for school because of the demands of their caring situation. And almost 1 in 4 of young carers say there is no support at all for young carers in their school, college or university.
Would the Honourable give way on that point?
I will give way to my honourable friend.
Thank you. It is estimated in Staffordshire there are around 2,000 young carers, many of whom are hesitant to come forward for fear of disrupting their home lives. And for those flying under the radar, it's even harder for them to get proper support. Does the Honourable Member agree with me that the DfE's commitment to create a more comprehensive register of young people will ensure that resources can be distributed more effectively and so that problem areas can be identified?
I thank my honourable friend for her really useful and really thoughtful intervention. And she's absolutely right. Part of the issue, one of the biggest issues I think around young carers is the identification of young carers. Firstly, young carers themselves don't recognise themselves as being young carers, and she's absolutely right to say some young carers are worried about coming forward. They feel as though identifying themselves as a young carer would somehow make it seem as though their parents are somehow failing them, which is absolutely not the case. I welcome the DfE's commitment to better identification of young carers. I think it's great that the young carers are now part of the school census, but we have to recognise there's much more to do. In the most recent school census, 72% of schools said they don't have any young carers. That cannot be right. So although I think we've made strides forward in this area, there's obviously much more we need to do, and I look forward to hearing the Minister comment on that. As many of you will be aware, because I mention it in most of my speeches to the House, I spent the first 15 years of my working life as a secondary school maths teacher, teaching in various schools across Essex and working with students of a variety of abilities from the ages of 11 to 18. And I, as again, recalled to the House a number of times the one parents' evening in which a student of mine arrived with both of his parents who were severely physically disabled. To my shame, and it's something I've carried with me, I had no idea until that point that he or his older sister were young carers. Since then, I have worked to ensure that I'm more knowledgeable about young carers and about young adult carers. And before my election in July, I worked for a wonderful charity in Harlow and across Essex called Action for Family Carers, which provides respite care and in-school support for children and young people who care for family members and loved ones with physical and mental disabilities. Young carers and young adult carers provide a hugely important role, not only to their families, but also to their communities, giving to the NHS in an invaluable way. And I think we have to recognise the actual impact that young carers have on actually saving money for the NHS and actually helping the economy. However, too often they don't get the recognition they deserve. In my opening remarks, not so much opening remarks now, I will focus on the urgent need for better identification of young carers within the educational system, as many do not even realise, as my honourable friend has said, that they're young carers until it has already impacted their lives. For them, it's just their normal caring for a family member or a loved one. It's just what they do, care for a loved one. Having had the opportunity to visit a number of schools in my constituency of Harlow who do a great job in supporting young carers, I must pay special tribute to Markville Secondary School, who allowed me to meet and talk with their Young Carers Club, and also Perford Green Primary School and Holy Cross Primary School for their great work in identifying young carers, as well as the many of the schools across Essex which I have previously worked in. Some schools are doing great work identifying young carers and having a designated young carer lead, but not all. It is vitally important that all teachers have a knowledge of young carers and young adult carers, and my first ask to the Minister today will be around making training about young carers a mandatory part of teacher training. Having a designated young carers lead is really important. Having spoken to young carers both through my previous role and now as the chair of the all-party parliamentary group for young carers, I know how much anxiety is caused for young carers having to tell at least five different teachers they are late or why they haven't got their homework done. One young carer recently told me of how he felt embarrassed to tell people, particularly having to ask peers to keep the noise down in the school library, because for him it was the only quiet place he could go and get his studies done, because he just didn't have that option at home. I will take an intervention.
I thank the honourable member for giving way. He makes a really valid and important point about having a lead at a school. And in Gloucestershire, every school, I'm very proud to say, has a young carers lead. But yet, one of my constituents, Christian, that I met yesterday, he'd been caring for his grandmother from the age of 6, but it wasn't until he was 11 that he was identified by his school. So whilst it's definitely an excellent endeavour to have more leads, there still needs to be more that's done. Would he agree with me on that?
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for his contribution, and the minute he said Gloucestershire, I recognised a number of the fantastic young carers that I had the opportunity to meet from Gloucestershire yesterday. He's absolutely right in his point. Having a young carer lead is really useful if you've identified that young carer, but actually we need to do more to identify young carers. I do believe there's a role that teachers, like myself in my previous role, can do to identify young carers, but you're absolutely right. The issue of identification is absolutely key. I also want to highlight the lack of structured support in schools, particularly during transitional periods between primary, secondary and further education. One of our young carers who visited the APPG told us about his experience applying to university and how the university website didn't provide any case studies that related to him. However, when we talk about transitions, we aren't just talking about moving from stages of education, but also how their caring role can change. And sadly, Chair, it's often for the worst. The responsibility falls on those in positions of authority to recognise and act. As a former teacher, I know only too well how easily these young people can slip through the cracks, and I'm committed to change that, which is why we need targeted training for educators to better identify these carers and equip them with the tools to help make their lives more manageable. However, there are other professionals who can help with this. One project my charity Action for Family Carers ran was to reach out to GPs. It seems nonsensical to me that when a parent visits a doctor's surgery with an acute medical condition, the question about their children's caring responsibility isn't even broached. In conclusion, Madam Chair, to support young carers, there should be a dedicated point of contact in education, a trusted person in authority who students can approach to discuss any caring responsibilities that might affect their studies, whether it's missing a deadline or arriving late to class, having one person to communicate will ensure the right people are informed and the students' needs are met. This simple addition can make a world of difference, and there are some great examples of schools that do just this, but it is not universal. There should be mandatory teacher training for teachers so all of them can help with a task of identifying young carers. And finally, transition periods, especially from primary to secondary school and onto college or university, are tough enough for everyone, but even more so for young carers without support. As highlighted by young carers at the All-Party Parliamentary Group, the leap to university feels unattainable due to lack of provision. We know that a number of young carers don't go to university because they're concerned about leaving they're cared for behind, and when they do go to university, they choose to go to universities that are close to home, which of course potentially limits their options. Education should be a place of hope and opportunity for all, regardless of background or circumstance. Resources must be in place for those facing disadvantage, ensuring those challenges don't just become insurmountable barriers. And to finish, Chair, I just want to say it's also important that young carers get the opportunity to be children as well. Thank you.
I remind members that they should bob if they wish to be called in the debate. The question is that this House has considered education opportunities for young carers. It's okay. Can I call on Daniel Francis, please?
Thank you, Ms Furness. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship. I thank my honourable friend, the member for Harlow, for raising this important issue, and I know it's a passion close to his heart, and he knows it's a passion close to mine as a parent of a young carer, which I'll come to in due course. But less than 1% of pupils are young carers, but it's important to remember there'll be many more that we're unaware of who don't receive the support that they desperately need. Too often the sacrifices and hard work of young carers go unnoticed and unsupported. Many children will be unaware of the burden that their peers face as young carers. Many young carers will feel as if their friends are unable to relate to their home life and the extra pressures they experience away outside the school gates. And again, that's something I know very close to home. I pay tribute to the All-Party Group for Young Carers and Young Adult Carers, and their inquiry published in the last Parliament in November 2023 found that young carers are struggling to balance their education with their caring responsibilities. Young carers are at risk of poorer attendance, attainment and more challenging experiences within education settings, such as experiencing bullying or social isolation. Young carers told the inquiry that they find it challenging to ask for help with their education at home, and that they don't want to add extra stress to their family members, who are often also undertaking caring responsibilities. And there's no doubt that the experiences that pupils have at school, both in and outside the classroom, are fundamental in shaping their first steps into the workplace. Evidence to that inquiry highlighted how issues with attendance, attainment and experiences within educational settings have a distinct effect on the likelihood of young carers pursuing or continuing their studies beyond 18, as my friend has mentioned. It also impacts young carers and young adult carers' experiences of entering and remaining in employment and their experiences within the workplace. The recently published report, Caring Classes, the Education Gap for Young Carers, published by the Carers Trust, found that almost half of young carers at secondary school in England were persistently absent in 22-23. And this means that they miss at least 10% of their education. That's one day of school every fortnight. And because they are missing school due to their caring responsibilities, it can be difficult for teachers to recognise when a pupil is struggling and identifying the support and help they need. I therefore welcome the work of the Young Carers in Schools programme run by the Carers Trust and Children's Society, and the programme helps schools to support their young carers for ensuring they attend school and help to improve their well-being. And more importantly, it provides schools and teachers with a comprehensive guide on how to identify young carers. And as a result of the programme, 94% of schools involved said that staff were more likely to know what to do if they identified a young carer, and 94% had a better understanding of the support required for young carers. I hope with the combined support of teachers, schools, parents and carers, young carers will be able to reach their full educational potential, and I commend the organisations, charities and schools that support young carers throughout their childhood in and outside of school. I just want to mention two other matters, Chair. Firstly, I was very lucky recently with my honourable friend from Beckenham and Penge to attend an event in his constituency at the Bromley Borough, in my neighbouring borough, Rotary Youth Awards. The awards there recognise 36 people from 17 schools for their outstanding contributions to the community. But I was hugely impressed that actually the majority of those young people were receiving awards because they're young carers. They're caring for family members, and in many cases they're also raising money for local charities associated with their family members' disability. And so I know my honourable friend would welcome me paying tribute to the Bromley Borough Rotary Youth Awards, which started 10 years ago with only four schools participating, but as I say, has now grown. In fact, with actually 20 schools participating overall. And lastly, I just want to talk a bit closer to home. You know, I'm the parent, or one of the parents of twins that are 11. My oldest daughter has cerebral palsy and a range of very complex disabilities. And her twin, 2 minutes younger, is the carer in many respects, because they do have that doting twin bond. But certainly during COVID, when they were 6 back then, and their mum was undertaking chemotherapy at the time as well, that was a very, very intense period for my youngest daughter, I have to say, with her sister needing full-time care support and no carers allowed in the house. And I have to say, you know, she's dealt with that admirably. And she's lucky, though, however, as my honourable friend has said. We got by that. She certainly was my number 2 during that period, I can tell you, to keep things going in the house. But, you know, we got through that. And actually her current school, her secondary school where she started last September, recognises carers, and they recognise that and the contribution that she makes and the support that she may sometimes need. Because, as has been said, as that, particularly when you're twins, as that issue becomes more predominant as you get older, she's got a sister who speaks 12 words. She speaks, you know, about 20,000, quite frankly. And, you know, as that gap gets bigger between them, but still that doting that actually that is my twin and I will be there most probably forever after I've gone to support them, that issue as a young carer is so important to her life. And so I do see that situation absolutely firsthand. So I pay tribute to my honourable friend in his work as chair of the Young Carers All Party Group, and for bringing this debate today, a subject, as he knows, very close to both our hearts, and I thank him for that. And I look forward to hearing the Minister's response to the debate in due course. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Irene Campbell.
Thank you. It's a privilege to serve under your chairmanship, Ms Furness, and I thank my honourable friend, the member for Harlow, for securing this important debate. Yesterday I had the opportunity to drop into his Young Carers event, which did an excellent job at increasing awareness around this very topic. For example, they shared key findings such as how fewer than half of teachers agreed that their school provides the support that young carers need. In a previous job I had in the NHS, I used to meet with young carers from time to time, and it was always, they really impressed me with the multiple issues that they were dealing with. So I'd like to highlight the work of a great group of young carers who are part of North Ayrshire Carers. They're a local group in North Ayrshire who help young carers meet each other, organise fun activities and have a break together, and let young people be young people. Services for young carers that often offer a range of support on anything a young carer might need, from walking groups and group stress management to guidance on how to apply for financial support if this is required, and that's really important. However, they report that young carers say year on year that education is one of the biggest barriers that they face, and young carers feel that sometimes that teachers do not understand their caring responsibilities, as we have heard earlier today. The Scottish Government has estimated that there are at least 44,000 young carers in Scotland, and that 29,000 of them are under 16. So young carers can have a range of extra responsibilities, as we all know, whether that be giving medication, looking after their other siblings, or emotional and physical care for the adults. So many young carers rely on local groups like North Ayrshire Young Carers, not only for time out and breaks, but also for one-to-one advice and information on how to access funding and school support. There is still so much more that can be done to support young carers in the classroom. by helping educational practitioners to identify them and by helping groups of young carers to continue their education, such as moving into further or higher education. Many young carers report feeling stressed, lonely or tired, and that they feel they are missing out on time with their friends or things at school. It is important that we do all we can here at Westminster to support young carers in education to combat this. So I'm delighted to see this debate taking place today and highlighting what needs to be done to ensure that young carers get the right support and educational opportunities that they deserve. And I look forward to hearing other members' contributions. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just check if anyone else would like to speak who I may have missed? No. Okay, I will go to Alison Bennett next.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, Ms Furness. And I'd like to begin by thanking the Honourable Member for Harlow for bringing a really important debate today. It's fair to say that he's timed it really well following Young Action's Carers Day, which, as he's mentioned, we both enjoyed yesterday, despite the hail on top of the open-top bus. And I think what struck me about that little trip around central London, talking to carers like Holly and like Ollie, is just how sort of strong they are and how strong they have to be, because they have no choice. And I find that really humbling. Every time I talk to young carers, it's deeply humbling to realise what they're contending with at home and then what they're managing to achieve at school and how they hold all of that together in the main part. And it's absolutely right that we do more to try and support them, to try and put the framework in place through all the arms of government to make sure that they can achieve their potential and also feel that they're not letting down their families at the same time, because I think that's something that comes through loud and clear, is that sense of guilt. So talking to Holly about the decision whether to go to university or not, she felt incredibly guilty about leaving her mum and her sister, who she cares for. But she went ahead and did it. She's got into Oxford, she's in her final year studying French and linguistics, and she's an incredible young woman, and I think she's going to go far in life. As the Liberal Democrat spokesperson for Care and Carers then, when I speak to young carers and old carers, I feel very, very fortunate indeed. And it's, as I've said, it's always a privilege to hear their stories. I'm always reminded, as I've said, about how much more there is to do to support them. And they do make extraordinary sacrifices for their loved ones, but as we've heard from honourable members, they do so quite often to the detriment of their education and to their futures. So in the 2022 to 2023 school year, young carers missed an average of 23 days of school compared to just 14 days for children without caring responsibilities. And perhaps even more concerning are the 39% of young carers in secondary school who were considered persistently absent, meaning they missed at least 10% of school days. These high levels of absenteeism are alarming, and the consequences are hugely damaging. Research shows a clear link between school absence and academic performance. And only 40% of absent pupils achieve their expected standards in reading, writing, maths, and at the end of Key Stage 2. This compares to 65% of all pupils nationally. So for young carers, this gap only widens as they move further through their education and fall further and further behind. And young carers are 37% less likely to achieve high A-level grades and 38% less likely to obtain a university degree than their peers. If they care for a loved one for more than 35 hours a week, they are an astonishing 86% less likely to graduate from university. While some support is available in the form of discretionary bursaries for further education, these often come far too late down that pipeline, when the damage has already been done. The Young Carers School programme, run by Carers Trust and the Children's Society, is an essential initiative that works to reduce these barriers by training local authorities and carers services. This is making a difference, but I think probably most members in the room, I hope, agree that this isn't enough. Carers, teachers and local authorities all agree that support for young carers is lacking, particularly when it comes to understanding and, crucially, identifying them in the first place, And that's even before you get into looking at what extra their need is. I hear time and time again from carers I talk to that this lack of recognition is perhaps the most fundamental problem they face. Not only recognition of them by others, but in fact realising in themselves that they count as a carer and that the support they are providing is above and beyond what is normal. Too often when you talk to young carers, they'll say, well, I was just helping out my sister at school, was having a meltdown and the teachers would call me and I didn't realise I was a carer. Although the previous government committed to developing training modules for educators to better spot young carers, charities and schools, we all know, are stretched far too thin to ensure consistent coverage across all schools. And that was a key theme that came out from the bus stop tour yesterday, actually, that different parts of the country have a very different offer for young carers. I firmly believe that young carers deserve more. No child should be forced to choose between their future and helping a family. The previous government left young carers behind, struggling with school absences, a lack of support, and the barriers to higher education. And on top of that, we layer, of course, the impacts of the pandemic. And as the Honourable Member for Bexley Heath and Crayford said, actually that sort of put extra pressure on your family, and I'd like to sort of commend you for what you've said this afternoon and everything that you've done and your daughter is doing as well to help the family. So we must change that. We must ensure that young carers are recognised, supported and given the same opportunities as their peers. This government has a real opportunity to do the right thing. Schools must play a more proactive role in identifying young carers, which is why I back our Liberal Democrat policy that requires every school to have an appointed, dedicated young carer lead. And meanwhile, higher education must be put within reach for young carers. To make this a reality, I and my Liberal Democrat colleagues believe we need to introduce a young carers pupil premium with targeted funding to support schools in offering academic and pastoral help for student carers. As with so many things, we must identify early and support early. This helps carers and it helps society as a whole, stopping problems before they've even begun and saving money in the process. I and my Liberal Democrat colleagues believe that young carers do deserve better. With the right support, they can thrive in education, achieve their ambitions and build bright futures, all while continuing to provide the support they need and want to provide for their loved ones. It's time to give young carers the recognition and opportunity that they deserve. Thank you.
Annie Kruger.
Thank you, Chair. It's a pleasure to serve under you, and may I pay tribute to the honourable gentleman for calling the debate, for his very good speech and also for the work that he's done in support of young carers over the years. It was very good to hear that. And I pay tribute also to other honourable members who've spoken today and brought a great wealth of insight to our debate, in particular to the honourable gentleman from Bexley Heath, who he and I serve on a certain bill committee together at the moment, and I feel I'm getting to know his family very well, and the more I hear of them, the more I like them, and I have paid enormous tribute to him and to his family for what they do in what are often very difficult circumstances. So I'm grateful to him for what he said. And particularly may I pay tribute to young carers across our country. As the Honourable Lady just said, it is absolutely inspiring and humbling when we hear their testimonies of the unsung, often unacknowledged work, often unacknowledged by themselves, as she says, work that they do. And it's always great to have the opportunity to hear about them and to hear from them. And if any of the young people in the gallery today are young carers, I pay tribute to them, thank them for what they do, and I hope they feel that they are being properly acknowledged in Parliament today. Now, as we've heard, it's not just the additional responsibility and the weight of caring for a family member or relative that is all-consuming for young people. It's the sacrifices that come along with this. For young carers, this often means missing out on social plans with their friends, not being able to commit to extracurricular activities outside the school day, too often having to miss school in order to fulfil their duty as a carer. And we've heard this point made. The Carers Trust surveyed over 1,000 young carers, and the results were saddening. A key finding was that almost a third of young carers reported that they always or usually struggle to balance their caring responsibilities with school, college or university work. And we understand there are 54,000 young carers in England and Wales. The overall absence rate for them is 12% compared to just 7% for all pupils who are not young carers. So that means a young carer is missing more than one school day per fortnight on average. And this commonly leads to persistent absences. So 39% of young carers were persistently absent in 22-23, compared to 21% for non-young carers. So twice the rate. And the impact of this is undeniable, not only on the educational attainment and opportunities of young carers, but also their sense of being included in the school community, which is so important. And I found it was very saddening to read in that survey that 28% of young carers reported that they either never or not often had someone at school, college or university who understood that they were an unpaid carer. And an even higher rate, 40%, said that they never or not often got help from their school, college or university. So even when it is acknowledged that they have caring responsibilities, many of them don't feel that they get any support from their institution. So there is no doubt, as honourable members have said, that more support does need to be instilled in schools, local authorities and communities. The points were made about the record of the last government, and I don't want to go into defensive mode too much, but because I actually very much acknowledge the points the Honourable Lady has made. She's clearly speaking the truth on behalf of young carers, as other members have as well. But in government, we were determined that all young carers received the support that they needed to succeed in all stages of education. And the pupil premium, which was introduced in the last government in 2011, gave schools in England additional funding to improve outcomes for children facing disadvantages. And this has supported the rollout of support for many young carers. And I take the Honourable Lady's point. She might well be right that it would be appropriate to have a targeted pupil premium for young carers, having a sort of eligibility, an automatic eligibility for pupil premium if you have caring responsibilities. So take that suggestion. I'd be interested in the Minister's view. I understand that 60% of young carers are eligible for pupil premium at the moment, which speaks to the disadvantage that many of them face. But it might be appropriate to be more targeted and more specific about the eligibility of young carers for pupil premium. The last government also introduced a... Happy to give way, yeah.
I thank the Honourable Member for giving way. It strikes me, as the Honourable Member was speaking, that an advantage of that would be that it incentivised schools to identify carers. And one of the problems we've spoken about this afternoon is the fact that many schools say they have no young carers. So it would provide that incentive. Does he agree?
I thank the Honourable Lady. She's absolutely right. That would be a very helpful incentive to help identify young carers who are among the school population. I'll come on in a moment to further support that schools need to do that work. There are bursaries that exist, as have been mentioned in the debate, introduced by the last government to help with the cost of education, such as travel and books, support for childcare, residential costs when required, and in the 2023-24 academic year, over £160 million of bursary funding was allocated to institutions to help disadvantaged 16 to 19-year-olds with the cost of taking part in education. And I recognise the point made by the Honourable Lady that those bursaries can come quite late in a child's education, and it would be good to be more proactive. And it might well be that more work can be done to ensure that children and their families get the opportunity to apply for these bursaries. And in fact, the schools are encouraged to support them to make those applications earlier on, because I bet there's loads of families who don't know that this bursary opportunity exists. And then another programme introduced in the last government in 2014 was the Young Carers in Schools programme, which addresses the point about ensuring that schools do more to identify young carers and to increase their engagement in school. And this programme set out 10 key steps to help schools identify and support young carers, each step providing key practical tools which can be adapted to support the individual school. And I recognise the Honourable Lady made the point that this provision can be quite patchy across the country, and I dare say that's absolutely right. So again, national schemes are great, but only great insofar as they're properly applied and applied uniformly to the best standard possible. So I hope that the department is working on that to ensure that we do have a greater coverage of that useful programme. The Young Carers in Schools Award allows schools to gain recognition for their success in supporting young carers. I'd be interested to hear from the Minister to what extent that programme has been successful. It enables schools to share good practice as well. My understanding is that the impact of the programme is positive. 94% of schools said in response to a survey that their staff were more likely to know what to do if they identified a young carer and how to support them. 94% sounds improbably good, but and it might be that that's a somewhat superficial response. Nevertheless, it is encouraging to hear that schools are positive about that programme. And there's encouraging evidence about the impact on young carers themselves. Just lastly, on higher education, the point was made there, very interesting and depressing research cited by the Honourable Lady, that young carers are significantly less likely to graduate than young people without caring responsibilities. And I understand that the Office for Students launched an Equality of Opportunity Risk Register, which identified 12 sector-wide risks that may affect a student's opportunity to access and succeed in higher education. This register made reference to young carers in 6 of those key sector risks. So there is obviously recognition of the extent to which caring responsibilities can impact on one's opportunities at higher education. More needs to be done, I think, to set out how education providers will improve equality of opportunity for students from disadvantaged backgrounds to succeed and progress in higher education and onwards. There's clearly more to do to ensure that all young carers get the support that they need to succeed. And so I do urge the Minister to engage with young carers, as I'm sure she is, with schools and local authorities to identify what additional support is needed for young carers to ensure there is truly equality of opportunity for every pupil. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And it's a honour and pleasure to serve under you as Chair today. Sorry, a technical challenge there. And my gratitude goes to my honourable friend for securing this debate on such an important subject, and really want to thank him for his continued contribution to improving the lives of young carers and sharing his professional experience and expertise. And for as much as we lament that he is no longer a maths teacher, we do celebrate that he is here in this place using all of those insights, those experiences, and putting them to such good and valuable use. I also want to start with a thank you to each and every child and young person across the country who selflessly cares for members of their family. Our government will do everything we can to ensure that you and your families have the support you need at home and in your education. Our opportunity mission is determined to break down the barriers between that link between a child's background and their future success. We want to see every child set up, including young carers, for the best start in life, to ensure that you can not only succeed at school but also thrive at school and really tackle that disadvantage that we know persists in far too many places through excellent teaching, through high standards, and through that generational challenge we want to see of improving school standards, and to really build on the opportunities for growth that every young person should have so that they can follow the pathway that is right for them, whether that's a high quality apprenticeship, whether that's going to college and going to university, all of which have been rightly drawn out in this discussion today. But underpinning all of that, what we are determined to do as a government is build family security, ensuring that every child, whether they are a carer or not, has a safe and loving home. And to do that, we need to tackle the scar of child poverty that we know impacts far too many children and young people and their families. The impacts of caring on children and young people's education has been rightly highlighted today, and it has been hidden for far too long. Too many young carers do continue to be invisible in their schools and to wider agencies. They fall behind their peers. They fail to reach their full potential and unlock opportunities despite the improvements in the assessment of their needs for support. It is absolutely unacceptable for any child or young person who selflessly dedicates themselves to supporting ill or disabled family members to go through their childhood without the support themselves. And we must ensure that no child faces these disadvantages alone. Adding young children to the school census has, for the first time, shone a light on their education. It's raised awareness in schools and given us much of the evidence that we've used for this debate. But we know that not enough schools are identifying and accurately recording the information on young carers in the census. As the Honourable Gentleman pointed out, 72% not recording any young carers in 2024. We do expect this data to improve over time as the collection becomes better established, but we are also looking at ways that the data that is being entered, whether we can bring in technical changes to support more accurate reporting, but obviously we have to do that without overly burdening schools, and we're determined to get that right. We also want to undertake further analysis of the data, developing and publishing young carers data on attainment measures alongside the data we already publish on population, absence, exclusions and suspensions. We'll also continue to work with organisations such as the Carers Trust, who I know work directly with schools, to raise awareness of these new data requirements and make sure that we can maximise the impact. Schools, and I agree with the Honourable Gentleman for Harlow on this issue, that schools should consider how they are recognising and meeting the needs of young carers. As set out in the Keeping Children Safe in Education guidance, we do require designated safeguarding leads to undergo training, to provide them with the knowledge and skills to be able to carry out their role, and that means having a good knowledge and understanding, alertness to and awareness of the needs of young carers. But also with specific reference to training for teachers, the mandatory initial teacher training core content framework sets out the minimum entitlement of knowledge, skills and experience of all trainee teachers that they need in order to be in the best position to teach and support the pupils in their school. Courses have to be designed so that teachers and trainees can respond in the best way possible to the strengths and the needs of all of their pupils. So from 2025 in September, all trainee and early career teachers will receive a training programme that is underpinned by the initial teacher training and early career framework, and that will set out the core body of knowledge, skills and behaviours that define great teaching and includes teachers learning that pupils' experiences at school and their readiness to learn can be impacted by their home and by their life circumstances, and that will include an awareness of young carers. But we do recognise that continuous improvement is really important in this area, which is why we have committed to review the early career teacher entitlement, including the content of the initial teacher training and the early career framework in 2027 to make sure that it is providing that best possible support for new teachers. And we'll obviously consider the issues raised as part of this debate today as part of that. Responsibility for young carers cuts across education and health into both children and adult social care. The Children Act 1989 and the Care Act 2014 place clear duties on both health and so adult and children's social care to assess and support the needs of young carers. Being a young carer was identified as a factor in almost 18,000 children's social care assessments in the year to end March 2024. So the needs of those young carers and their families must be fully recognised within the Children's Social Care National Framework, statutory guidance on the purpose, the principles for the practice of social workers. I will.
I thank the Minister and congratulate the member for Harlow for securing this debate. I think the Minister is developing a really important point, and one of the things that terrified me looking into research into this topic was that 38% of carers report having a mental health challenge in their life whilst in education setting. And so I really welcome the government's promise to deliver a mental health professional and counsellor in every school moving forward. And I just wonder if the Minister could give us an anticipation on when she thinks that might happen.
The Honourable Gentleman is absolutely right that people with mental health issues, including young carers, or their families, indeed, that they are caring for, are just not getting the help and support and care that they need. And we're absolutely determined to fix what is a broken system. And we are already recruiting 8,500 more mental health workers, introducing access to specialist mental health professionals in every school, rolling out Young Future hubs in every community, and looking to modernise the Mental Health Act, because we recognise that this is a significant challenge and one that we must address. And indeed, if we are going to achieve the differences we want to see for the young carers that we're talking about today, it's a very good place to start in tackling the issues that he raises. Our manifesto commitment to introduce a single unique identifier to help identify, improve information sharing, linking those multiple sets of data between government departments and organisations more quickly and more accurately is a really important part of this jigsaw as well. And I know the Honourable Member for Stafford referenced this in her speech as well, and she's absolutely right, which is why the Children's Wellbeing in Schools Bill introduces provision in law for this, and it will pave the way to have that consistent identifier specified so that organisations will be required to use it and create a clear legal basis for sharing that information, where we know it will promote the welfare and well-being of children, promote their safeguarding, and that will include young carers as well. And we fully support the No Wrong Doors for Young Carers Memorandum of Understanding developed by the Carers Trust on behalf of the Local Government Association. And it is absolutely vital that we improve that joint working between adult and children's social care services, between health, other key organisations, and we strongly encourage local authorities to sign up to it. The school census data for the first time is evidencing the impact on attendance, on exclusions and suspensions. And we know that young carers are far more likely to be absent from school, to have higher rates of exclusion and suspension than their peers. And we recognise that absence from school is almost always a symptom of wider needs within a family that they might be facing. It's also often the best early indicator of an unmet need in a family where they may not be in contact with other services, but that is manifesting itself in school or indeed by not being in school. Our guidance on school attendance highlights that schools should see absence as a symptom and prioritise attendance in strategies such as attainment behaviour, supporting disadvantaged pupils, including the use of pupil premium and support for young carers. And schools should also consider whether additional support from other external partners, including the local authority, children and young people's mental health services, as quite rightly referenced, GPs or other health services, whether it would be appropriate to make referrals where necessary. And it's of particular importance for young carers, where schools might be the first place to identify where there is a lack of the needed support for a family. And I wanted to, as other honourable members have, pay tribute to the contribution from the member for Bexley, Heath and Crayford, who spoke very powerfully about the circumstances within his own family, and indeed the things that we may have no idea about is going on in somebody's home or in their life, and indeed where that does manifest itself at school. I think it's really important that we have the mechanisms in place to provide that extra support where it might be needed. And also the Honourable Member for North Ayrshire and Arran spoke powerfully on this too. I think there's an awful lot of agreement in the House today on what we want to see. The daily attendance data collection has been established to ensure that we have consistent recording and monitoring of pupil attendance. We need to support the identification of patterns of absence so that we can help schools and local authorities to make the appropriate interventions. And we're absolutely determined that we have more children in school. You can't get an excellent education if you're not in school to get it. And where that is because of responsibilities at home, or indeed where you are a young carer, it's absolutely right that we use the data that we have available to target that support effectively, to make sure that every child can be in school and unlock those opportunities for themselves and indeed their families too. £2.9 billion has been allocated in pupil premium funding this year to improve the attainment of disadvantaged children. Young carer status, as has been discussed, doesn't attract pupil premium funding, but evidence suggests that around 60% of young carers are eligible through their free school meals entitlement. However, the guidance to school leaders is absolutely clear that pupil premium shouldn't be restricted to those who just have the eligibility for the funding. Schools must and should use it to support all pupils that where they identify needs, and that will include young carers. Just finally, on access to higher education, that it should be based on ability and attainment. It should not be based on their background. Opportunity has to be available to all. We might have to make sure that no group is left behind in our aspiration, or their aspirations indeed, to be fulfilled. And in the summer, we will be setting out our plans for changes to higher education and the part that we expect higher education providers to play in improving access and outcomes for all disadvantaged students. But in the meantime, I welcome the developments made in the University and Colleges Admission Service, better known as UCAS, to include young people with caring responsibilities. So this inclusion, along with the school census, highlights the need for much better support for young carers, and especially where we want to make sure they can make the best of opportunities and possibilities beyond Key Stage 4. So in closing, I want to thank my honourable friend again for raising this important matter, for all those who've taken part in today's debate, but indeed for his many years of campaigning on and working on this issue. Young carers contribute enormously to the well-being of their families, of their communities, and indeed to society at large. And that is why I think we are all here today, because they deserve to be championed. They deserve to be given the assurances that society will reciprocate and will support them in return. And I acknowledge that the education system, in partnership with agencies, it needs to improve to meet the developing needs of children, but especially for our young carers. They must be at the heart of our opportunity mission. So my final word goes to thank all those committed professionals and the volunteers who provide support to young carers, and may they continue to do so. And as a government, we will continue to work with them to improve the outcomes. And to the many teaching and pastoral care staff in schools, to the early help, to the youth, to the social work professionals, to those working in local councils, carers organisations throughout the country, I do feel confident that with your continued dedication and a government that is committed to improving the lives of young carers, we will make strides forward to support this important group. Thank you.
Chris Vince, 2 minutes to wind up the debate.
I thought I had 2 hours. I thank you, Chair. And can I just very quickly then thank all those who have contributed to this debate. I thank my honourable friend from Bexley Heath and Crayford for a trademark, passionate and powerful speech about his family, but the wider role of young carers. And I thank my honourable friend from North Ayrshire and Aaron for paying tribute to the young carer services in her constituency. I also thank my honourable friend from Stafford and my honourable friend from Redditch for their contributions, and the honourable gentleman from Tewkesbury for his learned contribution as well. Now, I do want to thank the Lib Dem spokesperson, the Shadow Minister and the Minister for coming to this really important debate. My experience would absolutely agree with the Minister that when there's a greater level of poverty, there is absolutely a greater need. And also, we're seeing more and more young carers supporting a loved one with mental health issues. We do need to do more to get more accurate data to understand the scale of the challenge. We also need to recognise that young carers have different caring responsibilities and often care for different people, and quite often those young carers have needs themselves. And I really welcome the statement the Minister made about young carers being part of teacher training. Finally, just to finish, Madam Chair, when you speak to young carers, you can't help but be struck by how thoughtful they are, how articulate they are, and how caring they are. And I apologise to anyone in the room who had an ambition to be a tax lawyer or a bank manager. But when you speak to young carers or young adult carers about their futures, they often tell you they want to be nurses, care assistants, doctors, teachers. I even met one yesterday who said she wanted to be a politician. But sadly, we meet too often young carers who don't have any ambition because all they can think about is caring for their loved one, and I think that's something that we need to take very seriously. I've very briefly mentioned, because I haven't, and Carers Trust will tell me off, the Young Carers Covenant, which identifies some of the asks that I've done today. I'd also really emphasise the importance to recognise the difference between young carers and care leavers. It's amazing the amount of people that don't understand that distinction. And finally, my ask to everybody, all of you, keep talking about young carers in Parliament. Young Carers Action Day may only happen once a year, but for our young carers, they are young carers every single day of the year. Thank you, Chair.
The question is that this House has considered educational opportunities for young carers. As many as are of that opinion say aye. I think the ayes have it. Order, order. The sitting stands adjourned.